Are there any particular tech or integration points that you're using, seeing good value in? I mean, even things like, you've talked a bit about Power BI and Power Automate. Are there areas there where you're seeing lots of benefits?
Yeah, there's lots of things going on, especially around, the introduction of things like AI tools as well. We've got links to things like ServiceNow. So when people search to kind of information repositories, one in SharePoint, one in ServiceNow, that's really stable. That works really well for us. It's changing all the time. It's the thing I would say is that we're constantly looking at new ways to integrate different tools. The Power Apps and the automated flows and how they connect with different tools have been really interesting as well, taking information from one place and putting it into another. That's helped with things around knowledge. We're in the process at the moment of our knowledge team is kind of rebuilding their knowledge hub, and they're looking at search and how they can make it even quicker and even better for the lawyers who need to get there and contribute to the information that's in there. So there's lots going on. I can't give you a full rundown of everything we're doing, and there's plenty to keep everyone busy. And the great thing about these is that I think for each example or each thing that you do, it creates almost like a case study for the next one. You learn something and you'll be able to improve on it the next time. And I think if we can maintain that kind of continuous learning, I think that makes a massive difference.
Fresh perspectives again. Hi, David. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Great to be here with you.
Welcome to another episode of Fresh Perspectives. We have a special guest today, Alex Pears. We're going to introduce you in a second. Who are you, Jabas?
Jabas Fast, Senior Product Manager for Fresh Intranet. And you?
I am still David Bowman, Product Director for Fresh Intranet. Alex, who are you?
I'm Alex Pears, the Intranet Content Manager at DLA Piper.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. We're gonna talk a bit about building a SharePoint intranet. Tell us a little bit about the company that you work for, DLA Piper, Alex. Who are they? What do they do? Give us some background.
Sure. DLA Piper are a global law firm. They have around they actually split into two entities. They actually operate in the US as well under a slightly different one. But the international firm has about 7,000 people. That's a mixture of associates, partners, business service colleagues, secretaries, and it's an incredibly interesting place to work. I'd never worked in professional services or a law firm before I joined DLA Piper. The range of things that they cover, really fascinating. And also how they position themselves in lots of the things that go on in the world, really, and how it impacts everyone else is one of the things I find that never stops being fascinating. And it's a really innovative place to work. There's lots of great people. I describe it as a kind of bright organization. It's really somewhere that you feel at home very quickly, but also is always pushing to be better. And it's very, very interesting. Has its own challenges, like most places do, especially around communications. But again, that adds to the kind of intrigue of it and the challenge of working somewhere like that.
Keeps the blood flowing. Hey, that's important.
Indeed.
All right. So a bit of background then. So in 2019, we began our relationship with DLA Piper. You weren't at DLA Piper back in those days. But I was at the what was the content and code business at the time, and I was responsible, I think, for leading the bid to win the work at DLA Piper. I will say that we won, so I must have done a good job there.
Good job, David.
And at the time, the reason that DLA were out in market looking for something else is that you were looking to replace an on-prem SharePoint. That the kind of primary reason that this was happening was, I think it was SharePoint was going out of support at the time. They were looking for a cloud migration. They needed to have somewhere to move the intranet to. The SharePoint on-prem intranet had some customization, so they knew that out-of-the-box SharePoint wasn't quite going to give them what they needed. And they were looking for something that was going to align with their Microsoft 365 strategy, something that they could access on mobile devices. So there was a kind of tech reason that they were moving. And I think in the time that we've got to know you guys, the fact that the intranet has become something else since then, become more than a sort of technology project, has been a really nice journey that we've been on. So that's why we all started working together. Give us a quick overview as to where you are today. What does the intranet mean for DLA Piper these days?
Intranet's called Pulse, and it's like the starting point for every task that every colleague needs to complete. It's a place where people can consume news and keep up to date with what's happening within the organization. We use it for storytelling around our journey in terms of our strategy and the direction that we're going in. But really, it's supposed to be like the central hub for the organization. And, it should be a place where you can easily access the tools that you need to be able to do your job. And not all of those tools are on SharePoint. Some of them link off into different tools in other places, but it's the central hub for all of that.
You talked a bit about storytelling there. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you use it for storytelling? We heard some great anecdotes on this when we were kind of talking in the prep for this.
Yeah, sure. So we use storytelling. It's relatively new. It's about 18 months since we started kind of taking a more direct approach with storytelling. So, when you work in a corporate organization, for some reason you walk through the doors and the way that you communicate externally or the way that you consume stuff seems to just fall away, and everyone just kind of falls in line with this corporate, very often quite dry way of sharing, using information. Our idea was to take the things that inspire us and that we're used to connecting with externally and apply them internally. And we know that, human beings are storytellers. That's what we do. That's what we've done for millions of years. And we wanted to apply that to how we communicate internally and how we share events, news, good news stories. So we started to kind of develop a more human, hero-led approach to our stories. It's been really successful. It's done really well. So now when you visit our intranet, you might come for the document or the policy, but you stay for the content. And that's really good. So in terms of like conversion rates, it's really helped turn people who might just peruse the intranet or go looking for a particular thing, taking them away and actually engaging them around the things that we're doing and what it means to them as people and what it means to us as an organization. And we do that through lots of different techniques. Sometimes we take elements from novel writing. So in the first, we'll call it stand first or the intro, whatever you want to call it, we really try and hook people in. So I think we did a story about one of our lawyers who was on the Swedish equivalent to Castaway. If you ever watched that,
yeah, the Survivor,
Survivor. Sorry, yeah. And what he took from the experience and how it's been able to improve the job that he does. And we used the first sentence of that story as a description of what it was like to be on that beach. And then 10 seconds later, have the organizer of the show tell you that you need to wrestle another person who's on the show for a bag of sand. And it's just a more creative and engaging way of playing with things that would often be coated in corporate jargon, maybe lack personality, and it's a way of bringing it to life. Because we're an organization of people, very smart people, people who are motivated, and to be able to deliver things in the storytelling format really helps circulate ideas and direction in a completely different way.
Yeah, and not needing to kind of ram vision and values down people's throats, right? There's a kind of subtle introduction and a reinforcing of those ideas through the content that you're creating on the intranet.
Exactly. Demonstrate the vision and value. Don't just tell people about it. Give examples and make those examples connect with people. And we do that through each other. That's what stories are about.
We joined with you like the the Step 2 award with DLA Piper. And there was one story that was also like very interesting, was about a German partner who is also a referee in the German Bundesliga, which is like equivalent to the Premier League. And when I was reading that, like that's really engaging, right? So it's very interesting also like to discover more and like learn more about the people, and then also how that reflects in their work. So I think the approach you have is really interesting. How is the team? How does the team look like? So do you have it's just you like work on all of that, like, or do you have a team behind you supporting you with?
It's a good question. I'm certainly not alone. I work really closely with the internal communications team, and when we took this project on about 18 months ago, we kind of we did a bit of a vote really and see wanted to see if anybody wanted to be involved in working on stories a bit more. So we created kind of like it's like a storytelling team who kind of work a bit like a news desk might, in a news organization. Then anything that comes across the desk that we think there's something to work with, we kind of get together and pick it up, and then we help each other to create it. So I don't think one person can really take credit for any of the content that we publish. I think between the whole team, it's something that we've worked on together. And you might get somebody who writes the story completely, and then it's handed over to somebody else who comes up with a brilliant headline. So for the example about the lawyer who's the Bundesliga referee, we had the headline lit and ref instead of lit and reg, and that came from someone else in the team. So everyone, we like to be playful with these things, and everyone gets a chance to input, and it's worked really well. I think the next step for us is really to kind of take it away from just being a collection of people who work on this stuff and get the rest of the team involved and make it just the only way that we do things.
Right. Yeah, it makes it very engaging and interesting, I think, for people to come to the internet and discover what's a surprise today when I go there, what's the topic to be covering. How DLA Piper is a very large organization. We mentioned already a few locations here like Germany and Sweden and the UK. So how is the audience that you need to address?
Yeah, the audience is large, and you've got to think that for each of the regions and the countries they operate in, they'll have their own leads, they have their own country manager. Each one will do things slightly differently. So the internet needs to be somewhere that people can access content on like a general international scale, so they can get a view of that. But it also needs to have like a local vibe, but they need to have like a local feel to it as well. So one of the things we've done is we use a lot of the web parts that you guys produce to kind of audience target content, and that allows different parts of the organization to see the content is relevant to them. But it also gives us the flexibility to say, look, this is important for everybody, so everyone needs to see it as well. What that does allow those different offices or locations the ability to do is to make sections of Pulse personalized to them, and that's worked really successfully. So for example, in Germany, they've got their own site that they use, and they can populate all of their news content that's relevant to them right there, and that becomes the way in for colleagues working in that area, but they're not disconnected from everything else that's going on as well. So you might bump into a news story or an updated policy that's relevant for you in your area, but actually we're not hiding away the stuff that's general that you might need as well. So it's in terms of connecting people, it seems to work really well. I mean, it's one of those things you have to work at. You can never leave it as it is. You've got to always be looking to make it better and improve it. And you've always got to be listening to what your audience is saying. And I think locally that probably brings its own kind of complexity, because the audience in one place might want things slightly differently to the audience in another, but that's part of the challenge. And I think that's almost part of the fun and part of the enjoyment of the job that we do.
Yeah, and I think in particular, having a system that is flexible enough that you can make changes quite quickly and respond to this kind of feedback, because as you say, maintaining that balance of, it's one organization, right? But there is kind of local interest. You've got to maintain the relevancy and the context of people that are visiting the intranet to make sure that they're coming back. So there are so many things that you've got to be able to balance to create something that works for everybody in such a large organization. So that, I guess the flexibility of the tools is really important for you.
It is as well. And one of the other things is that none of this stuff can just be a tell. You've got to get people to buy in and want to own it. So you've got to allow them the freedom to do things in the way that they want a little bit, and give them some guidance around that. And part of the job is creating a framework for them to work in. And you look, if somebody says something's not working for them, you've got to be able to empower them to make a change so it works for their audience. If you didn't, and you had some lengthy process that involved review and then change, and you would just never get anything done. And the person who's looking for something or wants to find that policy or document would just give up.
Yeah.
Right. Email someone.
Find some other solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got it. Yeah.
In terms of how do you keep this feedback coming to the team, right? So do you have a central place where people can go and share feedback, ideas for improvement, or are you working with surveys?
Yeah, there's the function for feedback, but I have actually found that that's been useful on a few occasions, but not loads. I think the biggest thing that makes a difference is that for each of the sites or pages that people have ownership of, we kind of use them as a funnel for feedback. So I think a lot of it is to do this. This is not about software. This is really about people, and having a good relationship with the people who are responsible for their area, and being able to be approachable and allow them to know that you're there if they need advice or if they want to make an improvement. It's essential. So yeah, feedback forms and regular check-ins and things like that, they're all really good. But actually, if someone can just ping you a Teams message and say there's something on this site that's not quite working, can we put 30 minutes in the diary to talk it through? It's far more successful. And I think that's the key when you have a large number of people and you have a lot of people who are responsible for different things. It's really about the importance of that relationship.
Yeah. And you also have a team who is listening, right? Like to the feedback that people are applying, and you have the tool that's flexible enough to reflect that feedback. And
exactly. And not every request is going to be doable.
yes.
People want things that sometimes don't even exist or are on a roadmap somewhere. But, it's important to listen. Like most people, you've got an idea. The worst thing you can do is not listen to it. You've got to find a way and an approach, and you might not find exactly what people are looking for, but if you can compromise and sometimes find a workaround, or sometimes find something that does work, or in some instances find something that's better, and reduces workload for someone or the owner of the site, and they don't have to do so much. Or you could do something with Power Automate that takes the task away from them completely, and it's automated. Then that all helps, and you only get that from having a relationship with people. You only get that from really listening and inviting two-way kind of feedback and conversation that's live and not just something that's on a form.
It's a really good point. I think that the temptation, I think particularly large organizations, is to try to systemize and automate as much of this stuff as possible. Push people into forms, giving feedback rather than having conversations. I think, as you say, you can miss a lot of nuance when forcing someone to tap something out on the keyboard, whereas being able to turn it into a conversation means that you're likely to get richer context from the discussion, and they don't feel like they're being passed off to some system to deal with. So that I like that kind of encouraging that level of interaction.
Yeah, it's been really important. And like you just said, the context is really important. Somebody might come up with an idea that actually can help the whole organization instead of just their own. And if you're just reading that off form, you're likely to miss it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think also like the way you have defined your intranet reflects the culture of DLA Piper, isn't it?
I'd hope so. Yeah. It's a welcoming place. It's a place that you feel like people are approachable regardless of the role that they're doing, and that's what you want the tools that we use to feel like when you're using them. That you might not understand something, you might not know how to do something straight away, or there might be an area that you want to learn and improve on, and being able to get that advice and help is really important. And I think that kind of reflects the culture.
Yeah, and I think particularly an organization where time literally is money. It becomes even more important that people can find things quickly, easily, get access to information. They've got somewhere to drop knowledge, encouraging people to share knowledge, information that, as a business, those are all really important values to the organization. And having an intranet that also reflects that feels very important as well.
Exactly. And that knowledge alone is worth money. It has a value to it, not just from a cultural sense, but it literally has a monetary value, and if you can speed that process up, that helps everybody, especially our clients who are on the other end of it.
Yeah. Let's look at some sort of more specific intranet topics then. Feels like probably compliance, governance are fairly good areas for you. How do you balance, what can be a sort of very dry procedural thing like governance and compliance with what you've been describing as sort of very relationship based, people orientated culture? How do you keep control of all of this stuff that's going on in the intranet?
It's not easy. It can be challenging. But again, sound like I'm repeating myself, but it is down to those relationships. Centrally, we kind of we have a bi-weekly governance meeting where we'll look at things like engagement stats, improvement suggestions, new tools that are available. If there's an an upgrade that you guys have done. It's in dev test, and we'll go through some of the key features and see how that could be used. But again, none of that can really happen unless you're listening all the time to the people who are using it and the audience, and also the people who are working with it day to day. And governance can be dry. We do a couple of things to make it more interactive. So we run something called the Content Club, which brings all of the aspects of digital communication into one place, and we run it kind of like a podcast, kind of like we're talking now, and we'll talk about some of the key themes, and we'll give people tips to either improve on things like their writing or things like page layouts, or what they can do around imagery and governance and making sure they're sticking to the tone of voice guidelines, or it can be around the more technical aspects. And just by doing those kind of things of bringing it to life, it takes down, I don't know, I think when even when you say the word governance, it makes you kind of go,
boring.
When you can bring it to life and stop thinking about it as governance and thinking it more about, the passport that allows you access to be able to do your job completely, then I think that's the right approach. But there are some words that just turn people off as soon as they hear them. But if you can make things more interactive and more interesting, then I think that goes somewhere.
And do you do things like content deleting, archiving? I imagine that those things are going to be more problematic in your organization as well.
Definitely. I mean, there hasn't been a place that I've worked yet where that hasn't been a problem. And that, like most people, like most human beings, we like to create and maintain kind of comes secondary. But it's no different. But we've started to look at different tools and how we can make that easier. We're working at the moment on like an automated flow system that identifies documents that haven't been touched after 6 months and then flags it to the person who owns that site. So all they need to do is go and click a button that says, yes, please archive or delete these, and it will go ahead and do it for you. We're not too sure if it's actually deletion or put into a file yet. We're working on that bit because, there's another side to this where if it goes wrong, it could be a bit problematic. But it's those kind of things that can help people and reduce the intensity and the demand on their time that make all the difference. And, automation is useful. I don't want it to overtake the person who's in control of it, but it empowers the people who are using it. It allows them more time to go back and review what they're doing. But instead of having a 3-hour job where they need to go through every document, at least it's just given to them and they can review it and then go and take some action. So I think that kind of stuff will help around compliance. Like I said, we're not completely there yet, but I think it will definitely make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, automation is very important. As you said, the more content you have, the harder it becomes to keep track on how content is changing and how old that is. So you need to add automation that, as you say, to save time in the end, for the people who has to maintain that.
Exactly. It's it's a success of the platform, really, because if it wasn't very good and there were just 10 documents you needed to look after, it would be really easy. I could probably do it myself in about 3 minutes. But the more people use something, the more gets added to it, the harder it becomes. The risk of running into a document that's out of date, or you can imagine turning up to a client meeting and you've got something that's 2 years older than it should be. It's something we need to get right. And also with the introduction of things like AI and using Copilot agents and the source material that will go and review, or they'll go and search. We've got to make sure it's completely right. So this is kind of like the groundwork to allow us to go and implement those things as successfully as we can. And it's not easy. And I think for anybody else who is doing something similar in a similar role, I think, give yourself enough time and enough space to really kind of work out what's going to make things as smooth as possible. What small changes can you make that's really going to help?
Yeah.
You have a very active intranet, as you said, right? So they also have content that keeps that also interesting. So how do you measure success over time? Do you have tools in place that support with that? So how are you doing that?
It's a really good question again. It's funny. So my view on measurement changes, and it has done for the last 15 years or so. We've got some really good technical guys in our organization, and they've been able to build a Power BI dashboard using an extract from Fresh's data, which has been invaluable. I can't tell you how useful it's been compared to the out-of-the-box SharePoint stuff. That's I've never really been completely confident if it's accurate or not. And now I can really drill into numbers. So things like unique views, looking at how sites are performing, looking at pieces of content and how that's getting on. That's incredible. That's really, really helpful. But there is part of me that thinks, how does some of this stuff make you feel? Maybe we should measure it so much on how much people are doing. It's how fewer questions they're asking or how successful they're being. Now, I don't really know exactly how that looks. It's kind of like more of a thought in my head, more of a thread. But I do think that at some point you've got to start looking at how, first of all, how our content is adding to the cultural value of the organization. And secondly, maybe not base everything on views and unique views and how many people are looking at something. Maybe it's about how quickly they got there, how useful it was for them. Were they able to go and do another job because of it? That's good because that gives me something to work for. And like I said, with all of this, I feel like this is a job that's never really done.
Yeah.
It's just about refining and improving the whole time. And, a week doesn't go by where I don't think about something else that's worth investigating. Do I get around to it? Often no, but it's there logged somewhere in the back of my mind.
It's just having lots of different lenses to look at the internet through, isn't it? The data or the numbers is one way of doing it. Talking to people, hearing positive feedback, getting people to produce questions, enhancement requests, they're all really positive indicators that people like this system and that they care enough that they're going to make suggestions for changes. I think it in a lot of organizations, the real test often of an intranet is when there's a problem, right, and people can't get access, and the volume of complaints that come in about, I can't access the intranet today. They're sometimes are often the first real test of how valuable people find this thing when suddenly they can't access it for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, if you get a request for someone who's trying to gain access to a page because they need to edit it or need to replace a document. And, I make a point of responding to those things as quickly as we can, because that's stopping somebody from doing what is a really simple task as part of their job. You don't want to get somebody caught up in the fact that they can't go and make a change and think about the effect that has on their team, the wider organization, maybe a client relationship. I hate for that to happen. Yeah. So you've got to be responsive. You've got to be quick. You've got to help people as much as you can. And I think we do a good job of that. And I hope that most people who, most of our colleagues would agree with that bit. Whether it's right all the time, fair enough. But I think when it comes to responding, I think we do that pretty well.
It sounds like, I think in experience, the most successful intranets that we've seen are often backed by an individual or a team that have got high empathy for the people that are trying to use the system, right? And exactly as you say, it doesn't need to be, massive things that people are doing, but responding quickly to things like permission changes and page access and updating information, and it's those kind of small things that actually save a huge amount of time for people on a daily, weekly, monthly, iterative basis. These are time-saving actions.
Exactly. And you think about your life outside of work. If you need to go and ask a question for a utility bill, for example, when they put you in a queue.
Yeah.
Yes. Why? So you've got to look at all these examples in the context that people are constantly having these battles externally. And the last thing you want to do is introduce one internally that you can kind of manage your way through and do it as quickly as you can.
Yeah. It's a really sort of interesting point to kind of linger on that. What was it, the kind of broken windows policy from New York City, where you have to focus on all the really small things to ensure that people kind of respect the bigger things, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think there's something, I think there's something in there about this kind of positive cultural point that people in the organization care enough to take care of this small stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
On kind of integrations, aware, there may be some specific things that you can't or shouldn't talk about with us. Are there any particular tech or integration points that you're using, seeing good value in? I mean, even things like, you've talked a bit about Power BI and Power Automate. Are there areas there where you're seeing lots of benefits?
Yeah, there's lots of things going on, especially around, the introduction of things like AI tools as well.
Yeah.
We've got links to things like ServiceNow. So when people search, they can search to kind of information repositories, one in SharePoint, one in ServiceNow. That It's really stable. That works really well for us. It's changing all the time. It's the thing I would say is that we're constantly looking at new ways to integrate different tools. The power apps and the automated flows and how they connect with different tools have been really interesting as well. Taking information from one place and putting it into another, that's helped with things around knowledge. We're in the process at the moment of our knowledge team is kind of rebuilding their knowledge hub, and they're looking at search and how they can make it even quicker and even better for the lawyers who need to get there and contribute to the information that's in there. So there's lots going on. I can't give you a full rundown of everything we're doing. There's plenty, and there's plenty to keep everyone busy. And the great thing about these is that I think for each example or each thing that you do, it creates almost like a case study for the next one.
Yeah.
You'll learn something and you'll be able to improve on it the next time. And I think if we can maintain that kind of continuous learning, I think that makes a massive difference. And, most of us at some point in our lives, we're going to use it. We'll use a digital tool that will connect to tools that we're not even aware of. Now, it makes no difference to us whatsoever. We can care less as long as it's doing what we want. And I think that's the direction we seem to be heading in. And I think we'll do a lot more integrations.
Yeah. I think one observation from all the conversations that we've had is how much value you're getting out of being part of Microsoft 365 for the intranet, right? Because it's in SharePoint, content and data is in SharePoint, being able to leverage things like the Microsoft 365 connectors, integrating ServiceNow with search, using Power BI, building this in forms. I think there's I guess I'm trying not to be too heavy-handed and pointing it out about, really just the benefits of having done this in SharePoint is so much bigger than just having a functional intranet, right? Because you've got all of this other stuff that you can utilize and connect to. Do you agree with that statement?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I think the other thing that I thought, when I first started doing this kind of job, the idea that I could pick up a tool and create an automated flow would never have crossed my mind. But these things seem to be so accessible now. And now that you've got access to things like Copilot, and you can ask it a question and you can get a step-by-step example, or for example, the license that I've got, you can go into Power Automate and you can speak directly with Copilot about the thing that you're working on. It's completely changed. I have to log a ticket with IT and get them to review something, which is probably going to take them a while to look at and look at my requirements. I can just go and play, and you can go and experiment, and you can go and try something, and fail really quickly, and then you can try again. And I think that's made a massive difference. And when it comes to the things that that are available within Microsoft, we've used things like Viva Connection, so we've got the intranet in Teams, so it's more accessible for people. We're looking at the different ways we can kind of send push notifications out as well. We can take things that are posted in Teams and use Power Automate to highlight them on our intranet on the homepage. These are all things that really would have blown my mind a few years ago.
Yeah.
Now I can do it myself.
And like for the users, it's in most cases like the same license, right? It's the same license to access SharePoint, it's the same license to access the content in the connections. So it's a big benefit that people get also like in being in Microsoft 365.
Exactly. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's like that kind of, there's an ecosystem. You feel like something is behind a door that you can't open. Suddenly you can get in, and you can bring it in if it's the right tool. I mean, I use that analogy quite a lot, that not every tool is going to be the right tool for the job. And just because, you don't have to have to be an expert at everything. It's just about learning when to pick up the right tool to do the job you need, and put it back down again when you don't, and pick up the next one. And I think that's what it's starting to introduce.
It's great. Like you mentioned Copilot, and it's really nice to see how Copilot empower people to achieve more, right? So you talked about Power Automate, and that's an area where I'm not like an expert, but by using Copilot, you can kind of, move forward with something you would maybe not have been like to achieve, isn't it?
Exactly. You can all be experts.
We can all be experts, yeah. We can I think because this is a very good point, right? So usually you would reach out to IT and create a ticket and ask for support. And that might take them some time because it's not just your request that they have. So now with AI, we can go directly to the application and we get a version that will help us understand if that's the direction we want to go. Right? And then maybe when we reach out to the IT department, they have like, hey, okay, so this is what the person wants, or you can just implement that. Or you have even like achieved what you wanted with AI.
Exactly. And for the person you're logging the ticket with, I'm only going to log it now if I really can't work it out myself. At least I've had a go, and that saves them time. So, it's becoming more focused.
Yeah,
Very
True.
exciting.
On this topic, Alex, what's next for Intranet? Are there any big sort of topics or themes that you're interested in starting to look at? We've talked a bit about Copilot, AI is kind of on the agenda. What's next?
There's loads. So I'm trying to think as far ahead as I can, which is not easy because I can't think that far ahead. But I'm starting to think what it would look like in 3 years' time. Completely reimagine it and then start building towards that. So things like Copilot agents. Do I have to go and visit the internet? Can the internet come to me? The idea that this was about visiting a web browser and taking me to a web page, I think that's going to start disappearing soon. I think the way you interact with something is completely going to change, and that excites me. That the idea that can make people's lives easier is something that I'm really interested in. And I think that anything that we start to think about now and anything we start to design needs to take that into consideration, because I think it's going to completely revolutionize how or what we think engaging with a digital tool is. And
I agree.
I think no matter what we do next, we've got to make sure we've got that in our minds.
Yeah, I think that for organizations, maintaining agility, being able to pivot as technologies change, having your content be able to be flexibly delivered through whatever user interface, whether it's SharePoint, intranet in the browser, intranet on a mobile device, intranet in Teams, content through Copilot, regardless of interface, making sure that your content is being structured and designed and maintained in a way that it can be delivered wherever people need to get access to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that once that I'm sure at some point there'll be a moment, and we'll all know it when it happens. But the more you can plan for it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think that some parts of the internet will still be required in the future? Because like this consuming the content, you might do that like through a different interface, which could be the agent, but maybe some parts might just like be required for like to do their work. How do you see that like work in the future?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, because I actually think that while you might have the opportunity to interact with it in internet through a different interface, I think that the way that we decide that we want to do that is going to be completely down to us. So I don't think you can swap one for the other. I think you need to have multiple options. And I think what's going to, look at when you go outside of work and you go into a streaming service and everything is personalized to you. I think that's going to be the big difference. If I want to go onto the internet via a browser and look in the 2025 style, I can still do that. But if I want to look in the 2028 style and talk to an agent, I can do that as well. Or I might want to, browse or peruse in my own time, because that's the way I like doing it. If I want to get something quickly, I'll go through an agent straight away while I'm on the move on my way to work. So when I get to work, it's already found all the documents I need so I can crack on and do my job. I think it's not cancelling anything out, and it's keeping all of the options open. I think that's what's going to be different.
Yeah, agree. Hey, if you were starting from scratch on another cycle, at DLA Piper, brand new intranet, blank sheet of paper, is there anything that you'd do differently?
There's always things I do differently. I think that goes without saying. But I think the one thing that I would definitely do is remember to always be a student. Never feel like this job is done. Keep on learning from the people who are trying to share information with you, and never think that you're completely right. You might go in the right going in the right direction, and you might have some good ideas, but actually the people who use the platform will decide that for you, and you've got to keep learning from them and got to keep listening.
Yeah. Good advice for people starting out on this journey. Let's conclude. This was a great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today, Alex. But before you go, do you have a favorite current app that you're using? Personal life, at work, something that you find yourself using more often than anything else?
It's a really good question, and you completely caught me on the hop. And it's not current, Well, I'm going to give you the context. Okay. So I came back from holiday a couple of weeks ago, went to Mallorca, which is lovely. And on arrival at check-in, the hotel asked me to download an app, and everything, all the hotel services went through it. Now, the downside to that is you have to have your mobile phone on you on holiday, which, if you can avoid it, you probably have a nicer time. But the upside was when our room was ready after it had been cleaned, you get a notification. If you needed something, you could go through the app from the beach. You didn't have to go traipse back somewhere. So I thought that actually changed the holiday. I didn't make it massively, better. I didn't get money off or anything like that. It didn't say to me, next time you come back, it will be free. But for a user experience and to make the bits of a holiday that, could just be that simpler, definitely one. I won't give you the name.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
If they want to pay me a commission, they can.
Nice.
Was,
Good. I'm glad that's your first instinct there. I agree. I think we were talking about small things making the difference. What there's no better example than that, right? Because just there's kind of retail, in-person, and online experiences coming together in a really positive way. The sense that you get is, here's an organization that cares about my experience and making sure that I'm having a good time while I'm here, having spent a load of money with these people. What a great example.
Thank you. Well, I can't take the credit. They can, but it made a difference.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alex. Good talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.